Right now, Mark, in the United States, there's 100,000 cold case homicides with DNA evidence available, right? In other words, they have a DNA sample, they have no match, it's sitting there in a database somewhere waiting for a match to be made so they can identify and prosecute someone. There is 650,000 cold case sexual crimes in this country with DNA evidence on file. I got a briefing on this technique back, probably about 6 years ago, and it was the FBI doing a briefing about familial DNA, taking these DNA samples from cold cases. And what gave me that wait a minute moment during that briefing was, and I'm not exactly sure what I heard, but something to the effect of the FBI taking those DNA samples from cold cases and loading them into commercially available DNA databases using undercover accounts. So like Ancestry.com, 23andMe, loading a DNA sample in with a quote fake profile and seeing what matches you get. And the investigative technique is building out the family. Now, statistically speaking, Mark, and this gets a little bit in the weeds, but statistically speaking, if 2% of the population participated in one of those commercially available databases, in other words, if 2% of our population submitted a DNA sample to Ancestry.com or 23andMe, we could identify at least a third cousin to 99% of all the DNA samples in the United States. That's how powerful this tool is. So what they would do is they would submit this unknown DNA sample as if it was a person, and they would say, hey, I'm curious who my relatives are. And they would build out a family tree using this technique and then using more traditional investigative techniques. In other words, census records, DMV records, credit history, who's living together at an address, are there different family members? And they would build out, all of a sudden they went from having just a DNA sample, no idea who this person is from a case that's 20 years old, to having a complete family tree. And they would say, okay, this crime spree happened in Portland, Oregon. Which one of these family members is about the right age, lived in that area during this time? And they would maybe narrow it down to a couple people and then go out and try to get DNA samples from those people, surreptitiously watching them throw out a cigarette butt in the street, getting their cup of coffee that they discarded after finishing it at Starbucks, testing that, and then boom, all of a sudden they have a 100% match, or as close as you can get with DNA, right? Whatever it is, 99.999% match, and they have their suspect.